right, well, it's just a couple minutes past the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone who's joining us both by live and by recorded video to this month's Let's Talk solution focusing on data flows. Let's take a quick look at the agenda. Jeff's going to be talking about data flows for all the different grant types, as well as grant batch types, and then some data health best practices, and we'll have time for some Q&A afterwards. This will not take a full hour. Let's see, we can go on to the next slide then. And my name is Amy Strom, your Director of Client Success, and today you'll be hearing from our Chief Innovation Officer, Jeff Armstrong. A couple of housekeeping items. We will be recording today's presentation, and you will be able to find this and previous recordings on NPAC's knowledge base. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use that Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We have team members monitoring your questions, and we'll make time at the end to discuss some of them if we need that extra time. With that, I'd like to hand this over to Jeff.
All right, thank you, Amy. Good morning, good afternoon, folks. As Amy said, today we're going to be talking about grant data flows. And so let's jump in. We are going to talk about where do grant records come from. So this will just be a high-level overview. We'll get into some much more detailed discussions of some of these in just a second here. But at a high level, grant records can come from designated grants. Designated grants is our module for recurring grant records. Grant records can come from online grant requests. In the portal, your fund holders can make grant recommendations and transfer recommendations that come into FCG, and those get processed to become grant records. We can also get them from web applications. So your scholarship applicants, your competitive grant applicants can submit their web applications. Those become proposal records and scholarship application records, which then through workflow become grant records. And we'll talk about that in detail in just a sec. So these are the three types of workflows here that create grant records from other grants. There are also a couple of other ways we get grant records. We get manual entry. You can just go into our grant screen and create a new grant or a new interfund transfer. And then you can also use our import function if you're using maybe a third-party tool for your scholarship applications or something along those lines, and you want to import your awardees for new grant payments, you can import them too. But at a high level, we've got these 5 different data flows, and we're going to be just discussing these first 3 today. Because they're not as straightforward as they sound. So before we get into those details, I want to just do a quick overview of grant processing. This should be probably review for most of you who have used Foundation Cloud grants. But grant records have their payments batched up regularly into check run batches, usually at least 1 check run batch per week for most of our foundations. And then the financial processing that occurs in those check run batches will create AP invoices in your finance system, and sometimes it will create GL journal entries for your interfund transfers. So at a high level, this is sort of what happens to a grant record once it's created through a data flow and comes in. This is your financial processing. And I started with this because we're going to show some data flows here that all end with these 4 little squares. So just as a review, you get your grants batched into check runs, and those go to the finance system. So let's start by talking about designated grants. Again, designated grants are the mechanism in FCG that we use for recurring grants. This is used sometimes for like a designated fund where you may say, every year we're going to calculate, 5% of a 16-quarter rolling average to give them their spendable amount. And so every year, if a fund may get whatever, $20,000, $25,000 to grant out, and maybe from the fund holder that every year they want to give 50% of that to their local church, and they want to give 20% to a particular charity, things of that nature. So those can be regularly scheduled through our designated grant module. And those designated grants become grant records and interfund transfers. Designated grants are also used for recurring grant recommendations, where your fund holders may say, I want to give $100 a month to this particular charity. And we use the designated grant module at FCG for that as well. So designated grant processing can result in standard grants, which is most often the case. You can also have recurring transfers that will result in interfund transfers that become grant records. But these designated grants are processed on a regular basis. Each one will have a frequency associated with it. So maybe you're doing these monthly or quarterly for each particular designated grant based on whatever the fund holder wants to do. But on a regular basis, you'll get standard grants and or interfund transfers created that become grant records. And then, of course, like we just looked at, those grants will get processed on check runs to become invoices and journal entries. So that's at a high level how designated grant workflow works to bring in designated grant records into FCG and to become grants for processing. Next, we'll take a look at online grant requests. And these are grant requests that come from your fund holders in the portal. Online grant recommendations get processed in FCG. There's an online grant request screen where you can see these incoming recommendations. And for the most part, these grant requests get processed to become either standard grants, perhaps they're transfer recommendations from your fund holders, and so you'd create interfund transfer grants. But either way, most of your online grant requests that come in are just going to be one-time grants. But in the web portal, we do have an option for doing recurring grant recommendations. And a fund holder may say, like I said a minute ago, they may say, I want to give $100 a month, or I want to give $1,000 per year, or whatever, to this particular organization, or I want to transfer regularly. And those recurring grant recommendations, if you have that feature turned on in the portal, those will actually become designated grant records, the designated grant module we just discussed. And these are the three different ways we can process an online grant request. It can become a standard grant or an interfund transfer. These are the most common. It could also become a recurring grant request, which will become a designated grant to be processed regularly into grants. And then, of course, once all these grant records are created, no matter how they get created through this flow, they go through that same financial processing. So that's the online grant request data flow. And the last one we're going to talk about here is the web application data flow. This one's got a few more moving parts, but it's should be somewhat familiar if you've used this before. Submitted web applications come in from our community portal. These can be submitted scholarship applications or competitive grant applications. They can also be for individuals who are doing maybe hardship relief or employee relief, disaster relief, that sort of thing. But the submitted web applications get processed in FCG to either become proposal records, and those are for the competitive grants, or to become scholarship application records in our scholarship module. Both of these records in FCG are still applications, if you will. They haven't yet been approved to be granted, and there's a workflow set up on each of these record types where maybe the YMCA is asking for $1,000, but you're only going to be giving them 200 instead. So you go through your workflow processing in proposal and in scholarship application, and then you'll hit that workflow step that's called create grant. There's a workflow task there to create grant, and that's where you create your grant record. You can have multiple create grant workflow steps. You may have a scholarship application where you're going to create a grant for the fall, and then if they meet the eligibility criteria and they keep their GPA up, they've submitted their transcript, then you could possibly do a second grant for the spring payment. But that workflow processing in proposals and scholarships is how we get grant records. Those grants then, just like we've discussed before, get processed in check run batches and go to the finance system. So that's the web application data flow. And there's a lot of data flows here. I've put them all into one screen here just to see the big picture. Again, these are our grants and the financial processing, but they can come from online grant requests going over to grants. Those online grant requests can also be recurring grants that become designated grants, which get processed to become grant records. And then submitted web apps go through proposals and scholarships, and through workflow, they can become grant records. So a lot of information to take in here, but this is the big picture of where grants come from, how they can all get, different record types can get processed to become grants. And I hope this clears up any misunderstandings on how this works. And Amy, before I jump into grant batch types, I'll go ahead and come up for air and see, are there any questions that have been posted in the chat?
There's not yet.
Okay, very good. I know this was a lot of information really quickly, so we'll make this available for download. You guys will be able to take a look at this anytime you like. I forgot to mention, you should take screenshots as we go if you need. Yep, feel free to ask questions later if you need to. Next, we're going to talk about grant batch types. There's a lot of confusion around what are the different types of batches used for. In the system, we've got 6 different batch types in Foundation Cloud. And really only 3 of them pertain to day-to-day processing for grant records. And so let's take a look at those three. First, we've got dockets. Dockets are really only used for board member approval of grants in the community portal. And so we've got some foundations where maybe your bylaws say that any grant over $5,000 or $10,000 has to be approved by the board, right? You can use the docket mechanism to batch up these high dollar grants and send them to your board members for approval. Once you publish those dockets, then your board members can log into the portal and see the docket and see all the payments on that docket that need to be approved. They can then choose each one to say, I approve, I decline, I abstain, et cetera. They can add comments, et cetera. And then if that function is turned on, then your financial processing can be set up to not allow creation of an invoice or a journal entry in the finance system until the quorum of approvers has been met for a particular grant record. So if you don't use this feature in the portal, you really shouldn't be using dockets. They would be confusing in your system to set these up if you're not using them that way, because we have other batches that will probably meet your needs. The check run batch you're probably familiar with. This is used for financial processing, and this is something that your foundation is going to need to do at least on a weekly basis, if not more. If you have an integrated finance system, this will create AP invoices or bills. It'll create journal entry records for interfund transfers, et cetera. And then the last step of a check run updates the grant payment records in FCG to say, yes, this payment was paid, here's the check number, et cetera, to keep your systems in sync. The final one is called a grant batch. If you remember from our GE Classic days, these used to be called correspondence batches a long time ago because they were originally just created for correspondence. But today we use them for correspondence and for workflow processing. And so really the only reason you would need to create a grant batch is if you needed to update the workflow, update a workflow step for a whole bunch of records at the same time. Or if you needed to do correspondence in batch. You can do correspondence on a check run, you can do correspondence on a docket. So, if you've already got them batched up for a check run and you want to send an email to all these folks, a grant transmittal letter or something along those lines, you can do it from the check run screen and you don't really need to do a grant batch. I didn't put them on the slide here, but we do have three other types of batches that are not commonly used. One is an encumbrance batch. It's for financial processing. If you don't use encumbrance batches, don't start until you talk to your finance team because that'll set up some transactions in your finance system that they may not be expecting. So encumbrance batches are for financial processing, but not for cutting checks. And then we also have proposal batches and scholarship batches. And those are similar to the grant batches for workflow processing for correspondence. We talked about how a proposal gets processed through a workflow step to create a grant. And you can do that in batch, in a proposal batch screen or in the scholarship batch screen. You can do those all at the same time and then send your award letters and your decline letters, et cetera. So these are the three core grant batch types. And again, we've had a little bit of confusion from folks who have migrated from Classic to NXT to say, what is this grant batch and where's my correspondence batches? And I set up a docket, but I don't know what to do with it. So hopefully this helps clarify some of what's going on with our batch screens.
We do have one question, Jeff, and it actually probably goes back to a previous screen on the applications. If one doesn't use the GE application program, is import the only way to submit scholarship grant requests?
Great question. So if scholarship processing is done outside of Foundation Cloud Community Portal, we want to bring those in. A couple different ways to do that. Yeah, you'd need to import grant records. That's what we'd recommend is using our grant import tool. They can also be manually keyed in as scholarship records in the scholarship module, but honestly, that sounds like a whole lot of work. I would recommend if you've already picked your awardees and you've got 1,000 applications, but you're only going to award these 75, yeah, I wouldn't bother typing in 75 brand new scholarship application records. I'd go ahead and import them as new grant records. The grant import tool import with the status of request, which means they have not yet been paid and they're ready for batching and financial processing.
Great, thank you. I do have one other question. What is the difference between an internal transfer and a transfer grant? What are the implications of using one over the other?
Yeah, essentially the only difference is financial, and it has to do with your chart of accounts as set up in your finance system. So there are a lot of times a finance system will set up funds. They'll set up accounts that are different for a grant transfer as opposed to a non-grant transfer. I don't quite know the business reasons behind why they would do that, but for some reason, there are some foundations who want to track grant transfers separately than standard transfers. And so, like, if I'm transferring money from one of my DAFs to another of my DAFs, that probably wouldn't be a grant. But if the foundation has, a neighborhood beautification fund or something along those lines, and I wanted to transfer there, that would probably be a grant transfer. Probably doesn't have any tax implications for me or any finance implications for me as a fund holder, but the finance department may want to track that separately. So by checking that box, the debit and credit accounts that show up on the grant record that are available for whenever you're creating the journal entry in the finance system, those account numbers are different based on whether you check that box or not, and that's just all depending on your finance setup.
Great. Thank you. I do have one more, Jeff.
Mhm.
Does one have to use the workflow? Can those be turned off and go forward to process and submit grant requests without that?
Workflow is required for getting a proposal or a scholarship application in FCG to become a grant. If you want that full chain of the workflow to stay intact, where you say, this is my web app, which was linked to a proposal, which is now linked to a grant, et cetera. If you want that full chain to be intact, you've got to use workflow to do it. Another option, though, if you don't want to go through the scholarship module or through the proposal module, is you could just take your incoming grant applications, process them in Excel, and then when you're ready to pick your awardees, you can just import those as new grant records using the grant import tool. The downside to that is if your folks have applied in the portal, then they won't be able to see their awards, right? So in Foundation Cloud Community Portal, there's a way to create applications and submit them. There's also a My Awards page, and you can see the status of your application. And if you skip that workflow step to create the grant record, then that full history won't be visible to your applicants online. But if you're using a third-party system, you won't need to do that. So, yeah, good questions.
Great, thank you.
All right, so let's jump in and talk about data health best practices. We recognize that you guys have data across multiple systems. You've got your Foundation Cloud Grants data, you've got some CRM data, you've got some finance system data, and if you have constituents in your CRM and vendors in your finance system, and then constituents in FCG that point to all those records, it can be a lot to keep track of, and you've got quite a bit of responsibility there to make sure you don't have duplicates and to have good, healthy data. But we've got some tools and some best practices here to help you be a good steward of your data across all these systems. So I'm going to open up Foundation Cloud Grants in just a moment and talk through some of these, but I'll go ahead and list them out here. And once we get through all these, you can take a screenshot if you want to, and we can come back in just a second here. But portal user registrations. The Foundation Cloud Community Portal will allow folks to register for an account and then start applying for grants or for scholarships. When a new registration is created by the portal, we look to see if there's an existing constituent record with that email address. And if so, we won't create a new constituent. We'll just reuse that same one, assuming they don't have a web account already. But for the most part, new portal user registrations are going to get new constituents created. And for records like scholarship applicants, that's okay. Chances are Johnny doesn't have a record in any of your systems yet. But if a local charity is going to register to apply for a grant, you might already have constituent records for those folks. And so when they've registered, they've possibly created a new duplicate. Using the portal processing queue screen, you can nip those in the bud, find them early on, and avoid longer term problems by having constituent records. And we'll show some ways to do that on the portal processing queue screen. When you are creating a new grant record or proposal record, et cetera, it's a good practice to look up records in the CRM and the finance systems before clicking that button that says create a new one. We've got lots of places in FCG where you can create new constituents in CRM, you can create new vendors in finance, but don't be too trigger happy there. Let's make sure that those records don't already exist, because if you end up creating duplicates in those systems, then some of our automated sync mechanisms may end up bringing them in and bringing duplicate records in your Foundation Cloud Grants system, and it will just be a big mess to clean up. So avoid that in the first place by doing lookups before you create new records. If you're not familiar with it, you can use the constituent utility to identify duplicate records in our database, in your CRM database, in your finance database. And not only identify them, I should have put this here in the bullet point, you can also merge records and clean up some of your data from that screen too. So it's a good best practice to go into your constituent utility, every month or every quarter and just see, do I have duplicate constituents? And if so, let me merge some of these and clean them up. And we'll take a look at that in just a second. Remember too that your CRM system will have constituent codes. You can say this is a grant applicant, this is a grant payee, this is a fund holder, etc. Those constituent codes in CRM have expiration dates. There's a date to and a date from. So maybe this person is a fund advisor starting on such and such a date and ending at a particular time. And when those constituent code expiration dates come, we're going to remove some of the flags in FCG whenever we do our automated syncs. So that's a great feature to keep your CRM and finance systems in sync. But just keep in mind that whatever you are setting up there in your CRM constituent code, date to and date from fields, that is going to affect your Foundation Cloud Grants data. And then finally, when you log into Foundation Cloud Grants, watch your notifications toolbar item. You can see sync errors. We have our nightly sync processes, and anytime there's an error, we will flag it as a problem that happened overnight. You can take a look at it, and then we have a screen where you can do manual syncs if you need to go in and resynchronize. You can try that. Of course, if you can't figure it out, you can open a support ticket, but we do provide a mechanism to keep you aware of sync problems. And if you're having sync problems, it can lead to duplicate data or missing data in the long run. So you're going to want to stay on top of your sync status. So with that said, let's see it in action. I'm going to pull up Foundation Cloud Grants in our demo environment here. And we'll take a look at some of the things that we just talked about. And the first one here is this notifications bar. I may go in reverse order here, but this is your portal processing queue. The web users that need attention. These are folks who have registered in the portal. Mostly it's new registrations. It can also be folks who are portal users who have gone into their account and possibly changed their contact information, new address, new phone number, new email, etc. And you can do your processing in the web processing queue from here. In fact, each of these you can click on and it takes you to the screen to take a look at what's going on. Looks like we had one sync process error overnight. That's what I was mentioning before. We'll go take a look and see what that error looks like. You can also see new records that have come in. We've got new online grant requests that have come in from fund holders. We've got new fund requests from fund prospects in our portal as well. That's kind of cool. Fund investment changes. Maybe a fund holder has logged in and said, I want to change my investment strategy. And so you can see those pending changes. And then for this user, I've logged in as GE Service, but for your user account, you can also see the workflow tasks that are assigned to you and the ones that are flagged as overdue as well. So these workflow tasks are workflow records on grants and on proposals and on scholarship apps. So when you see the sync process error, we can click on this one. And I looked at this one this morning. This isn't giving me a whole lot of information, but the log text is telling me that overnight we deleted some old error logs, and for whatever reason it thinks this was a problem, even though it says it was completed successfully. So I don't know what this means, and so if it were me, I would just open up a new support ticket. You can come over here to the green help slider anytime and access the knowledge base to search for an answer, or you can contact support, and this will take you to our support site. So that's how we stay on top of sync issues. Let's take a look at the portal processing queue. These are the web users that need attention, either new registrants or folks who have changed their information in the portal. I'm going to pull up this one, my record. And this is telling me quite a bit here, a lot of information here. This is the web user information. This is the constituent information. If I had gone into the portal and maybe changed my address or changed my phone number, then this would be highlighted yellow to tell me that I've got a change in the constituent record compared to what's in the web user record. I can click this update button and it'll just move all these field values over from whatever the user has said in the portal to the constituent record, and I can update that if I need to. This is a new user registration. I can see what the roles are. This is a grant applicant who's been approved. Maybe some of your roles have pending statuses, and so the status would be pending. Or if you've declined something, you can say that their status is denied. What I really want to show you here on this screen, though, is constituent data health. And so you can tell this is linked to a constituent in FCG. This might have been a newly created constituent. And in fact, I think it was. If you know there's already a Jeff Armstrong record in here, then you can go change this and go search for another J. Armstrong record. And it found several in here, and I can say, no, this is the one we need to like that. Essentially, it'll take this web applicant information, this web user information, and move it over to a new constituent.
A quick question here for you,
Mhm.
Jeff.
Yeah.
Is it safe to assume that our CRM and financial database always overrides FCG, or is there ever a case where FCG overrides the CRM?
Great question. There are a couple places where you can manually override what's in CRM and finance, but for the most part, the sync processes bring in data from your CRM system and from your finance system into your FCG database. The sync harmony processes will actually look for changes in either your CRM or your finance system. It'll bring those changes into FCG, and then if you have it configured to do so, it'll push those changes back to the opposite system. So if you make a vendor address change in your finance system, Sync Harmony can find that and bring it into FCG, and then it can push that change back to the constituent record in your CRM system if you've got it set up to do so. So that's an exception to the rule, but generally speaking, what's in those CRM and finance systems is going to be brought in to FCG. You can also take a look at a constituent record here in FCG, and if you are connected, I'm connected up here. If you're connected to the CRM and finance systems, you can make a change to an address, and it'll prompt you, do you want to push these changes to your CRM and or finance systems? And you say yes, it'll push them across to those systems. That's a manual process, though. We don't automatically push new data to CRM and finance. For the most part, the data here is CRM or finance, or what's been manually created here in FCG.
Great, thank you.
You bet. In this record, we can see I don't have a constituent record in the CRM system. And so again, one of those best practices, don't just click create. Let's go start with the CRM lookup. And we can look for, you can search for the same one. I don't see a Jeff Armstrong record. So now I know I'm probably safe to create a new Jeff Armstrong record. And so it's going to prompt me, am I sure? I'm going to say no for right now, but it'll prompt me, am I sure? I'm connected to CRM. And so at this point, it'll go create a new individual constituent in the CRM system. There's similar functionality around the org access. If I'm applying on behalf of an organization, you can do a lookup and a create in your CRM system. And that create button will not create an individual. It'll create an org constituent record in your finance system. One of the nice features here too is possible duplicates. So Jeff Armstrong registered on the portal, and Foundation Cloud already knows, hey, you might have a duplicate here based on name, some other criteria. I could look up and see maybe there's another duplicate I know. Maybe I should look for Jeffrey and not Jeff, right? So I could go do a manual lookup. But if I find one here and say, yeah, this is a duplicate, I want to merge these two, it's going to bring it up and tell me that this constituent, and I can look at the constituent ID and say this will be merged into this constituent. This one's older, this one's newer. So we already had a Jeff Armstrong constituent record, different addresses, but that's okay. I'm ready to go ahead and merge. Or I want to switch them around, and I want to keep this constituent. I'm sorry, keep this one and get rid of this one. Merge all this data into here. So I can reverse them. Once I'm ready, I just say merge, and behind the scenes, there's a lot that it does here. It goes into grant history and application history and submitted online grant recommendation history, and anywhere we have a constituent ID that says 1101, we're going to update that to be 1525, and then we're going to delete 1101. And that includes web users across the board. It's a huge procedure behind the scenes, but for you guys, it's easy. Just click a button. You can merge them together. You can do these one at a time here in the portal processing screen. And that's definitely a good idea. As these come in, you can see this and, maybe nip this duplicate data problem in the bud, right? But like I mentioned before, it's a good idea to go into the constituent utility and do this on a regular basis and just look across the board for duplicates. So I'm going to go ahead and close this and jump over to that screen. We'd get there by going to settings and data tools. This is where we'll find some really handy data tools. This is where we can do our grant import. This is where you can do a manual sync. You've got your nightly sync processes, but if you need to run one of these manually for any reason, you can do it from here. Our global delete function is here. And then what we really want to see today is this constituent utility. This will tell you if you've got duplicate records. And so I'll look at duplicates by name. So let's do that. And then I can sort by name. And I can see, okay, I've got two AARP records. They've got different constituent IDs here in Foundation Cloud Grants, but they've got two different CRM IDs as well. So this tells me I probably have a duplicate in the CRM system. Just as a best practice, if you've got duplicates in CRM and you've got duplicates in FCG as well, you definitely want to merge in CRM before you merge here in FCG. Because you can go to the trouble of doing a merge here, and if you still have two constituent records in your CRM system, it's very likely that an overnight sync would bring in your duplicate record all over again, and you'd still end up with the same problem. So start in CRM, merge them there, and then when you're ready here, you can merge them. If I open one of these, this isn't going to open the constituent record. It's just going to open this processing screen, and it'll tell me that I've got this old constituent ID. I have a much newer one as well. This one's got an address on it. This one I don't even see an address. So there's no vendor record in the finance system associated with this one. So I'm only looking at CRM issues. But these are potential duplicates by name. So I can select one of these and go to that same merge screen. Pick which one I want to keep, pick which one I want to get rid of, reverse them if I need to. And I can process those one at a time. Great thing about this tool, I just looked up duplicates by name, but we've got more options here. We can do duplicates by the CRM key. Oh, I think something's going on with my Foundation Cloud Grants.
Let
Try
me
to
ask
start
you a
it up
couple
again.
questions, Jeff, while you're
Yeah,
resetting here. Can you
sounds
talk
good.
about what user rights can do the merging and syncing?
Oh, great question. Really good question. Let's jump into security and take a look and see. The merging, I believe, let's take a look at roles and permissions. For merging, I believe you have to have access. Oh goodness, I'm gonna have to look that up and get back to you, I think. I know there's a menu item for administering constituents. But I think there's a very specific one just for that admin screen. There's an that's you've stumped the band here. Administer profiles. I want to say there's a constituent. I'm going to need to get with our engineers and get back with you. I'm not
Okay.
sure.
She did say sorry, but we'll get
Fair
back
enough.
to you on that one. And I have one other question, and it kind of
Mhm.
goes back to a previous question. And what happens if the constituent is in the CRM, but some of the information in the web user processing queue is different from what is in the CRM record? Like they provided a new email address or something. Will it bring that information into the CRM, and will it add it or overwrite the CRM?
Great question. Let's take a look here. This is the Jeff Armstrong record again. If the web user changed their email address and this email address no longer matches what we've got, then we can make that change here. We can go directly to the CRM. So this has NA, so this doesn't even have a CRM record, but I could zoom to it. This would be a link just like this is, and that would take me to the record in CRM. I could manually change it there. But I want to say whenever I do this update, it's going to prompt me, do I want to push these address changes to the CRM system as well? And if I say yes, it'll make an API change and manually make that address change. I don't have access to do it on this record because I don't have an RE key. This one's got a CRM key. Let's take a look and see if I go to, this is the Razor's Edge NXT constituent record for GIF. Our constituent record has the wrong name in it. In fact, we probably ought to go into this record and do a refresh. This little refresh button is basically the same thing as a sync, but it's just for one record. You don't have to schedule it to run nightly. You can just do one quick update. So this brought in the name again. Now let's go back to that record. And now what we see is what's in the portal is no longer the same as what we have in our constituent record. They've got a different address. They said they're on Main Street in Houston. that this is somewhere in whatever out of state. So this little update button will take all this data and move it over. And then we can do an update. Are you sure you want to process this user? Yes. And then I think it's behind the scenes. Would you like to send this web user an email notifying them of their changes? This will do some correspondence and let you do an email. And
Will
it
that
didn't prompt
push
me.
change what is in the CRM or just add the new information?
That's what I was testing to see. It's been a long time since I looked at that. I thought it immediately updated the CRM system, but I didn't see that happen. So if I go back to gifts record, oh, you know what? I just updated that record and it removed it from the queue completely. So this one doesn't have a CRM key. Let's see if we can find one that does. These have, I'm so sorry, we're not working with a great data set here. We're in the process of creating a whole new, really good data set. So there's a CRM record. We make changes here. And this updates the constituent codes as well. See, I wonder if it's updating it and not telling me about it. We're going to need to get with engineering and find an answer to that one as well.
Great, thank you.
I'm so sorry I don't have an answer for you on this one.
That's all right. We have that on here. And then if we go back to the system administrator access,
Yes.
currently only system admins can do that merging and syncing. They were just wondering if there was more granular type of access that can be given.
The answer is yes, but I don't know what needs to be given off the top of my head. Obviously, there's an
We'll look
admin
into that.
screen. You've got to give, so like if you want your grants administrators, for example, or your grants users to be able to do it, you could give them access to an admin screen. I think that'll give them access to the menu. But then I want to say there's another permission just for this utility. Yeah, here we go. Run constituent utility. So there's a permission here called run constituent utility that they'll have access to. That'll need to be granted to whichever to give folks access to. That's the constituent utility in the data tools. They may not be able to even see that data tools menu or the settings menu unless you give them access to the admin screen. So I know it's at least this one, but there may be others involved. I could try to find it by trial and error here, but a better thing to do would be for me to get with the engineers and get you a very specific, accurate answer back. So Amy, if you could note which person asked that so we can follow up afterwards.
Yes, great. And we can also include it in our follow-up email, Jeff, if we need to.
Okay. Sounds good. One more thing I was going to show you, that web processing queue screen has a lot of data. It's a bit confusing. So another screen that's often used for constituent lookups is here in our main grant screen. So if you're manually doing a new grant and you want to do a recipient, we could look for the South Carolina Blood Bank. It's here, so I want to use it. But if for whatever reason I couldn't find what I was looking for, I wouldn't want to just go immediately create a new RE constituent. I would want to go to RE Next and search there first. Always search your CRM system here before trying to go in and create a new constituent record. Because I can see that it's here and I don't need to create a new one. I can just select it. If I can't find it, then of course I'll need to go ahead and do this, and it'll prompt me for this information to be used to create the constituent record in the CRM system. Remember that most CRM systems have a difference between their organization and their individual CRM records. So as you're doing this, make sure you've got this box set correctly. If it's for a grant recipient, it's most likely going to be for an organization, so you'll want to check that. Checking these boxes will essentially drive which constituent codes that we set up. So if you say this is an applicant or a grant recipient, then it'll give it that grant recipient GRR, whatever the constituent code is in your CRM system. And you can check as many of these as are relevant. So Amy, that was it from my best practices. We can certainly open up for more Q&A if we've got more
Yes,
questions.
we do have another one.
Okay,
This one's about record deletion. Can you delete orphan records, ones that are detached from your CRM or finance system? Or if you delete a record out of your CRM and finance, how do you get it to be deleted from Foundation Cloud?
great question. So let's say you've gone into, let's go duplicates by name. Let's say you've gone into your CRM system and discovered AARP has two records in FCG, and that's because it has two records in the CRM system, right? You want to go into CRM and merge one into the other. Once you've done so, in Razor's Edge, so this is a constituent record in Razor's Edge. I can see from the URL, the web address up here, 7516. I can note that that's my system record ID for this constituent, right? And then when I'm doing this merge, I can decide to keep the one that I kept and get rid of the one that I got rid of in the finance system. And of course, if you do that wrong, then you can always undo it. You can always fix it. So in fact, let me close this and go to a constituent. This constituent has a link to sorry, this one doesn't have a CRM or a finance record. So from here, if I want to link it to a record, I can associate that. So this will do a lookup in the CRM system. And that's right, we looked, there aren't any Jeff Armstrong records. But if I found a Jeff Armstrong record in the CRM system, I could say this one links to this particular account. So if you happen to merge and you pick the wrong one accidentally, then you'll have essentially an orphan record. So it'll look like there's a linked record, but if you come in here and click on your zoom, it won't go to the right place. So you can unassociate and reassociate that. And that can be done through the constituent utility. Let's go back to data tools, constituent utility. If I look at this AARP record, this tells me that this is the CRM record for the AARP. If I click on that, it'll open up a new browser tab and take me to this record. It should. It's not cooperating with me today. 19106. It should take me. I don't know what's going on in the system today, but it should take me to this constituent record. Oh, there it goes. It finally started loading it. But this is that AARP record. I think I clicked too many times. I got impatient. Serves me right. All right. Here's that AARP record. And if I know, all right, so if this CRM ID is correct, then it's going to take you to the right record. If merged a couple of records in CRM and you came to FCG and you merged wrong, then it's no problem. You can unassociate from them, and then you can reassociate. And that associate is just an RE constituent lookup. But just as a best practice, when you're going to merge, let's open this up. It'll show us the duplicates. If I go to that merge screen, this will tell us that this is the RE key and this is the RE key for these two records. And I can go into Razor's Edge and see which one I've merged, which one I've removed, and which ones I've kept. And then I can make the decision correctly on which one I merge into which here in Foundation Cloud Grants.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We do not have any other questions at this time.
All righty. I didn't think we'd use this much time. It's already 11:45. I'll jump back to our PowerPoint again. So we do have a few minutes. I'm more than happy to stick around for the rest of this hour if anyone's got any more questions. But Amy, I'll let you take it away here.
Sure, sure. I would just wanted to remind everyone about our next Let's Talk Solutions, which will be on Wednesday, October 18th. And as always, if you think of other topics you would like to see us cover on these Let's Talk Solutions, shoot me an email and we'll get them teed up into our list. Let's see, I think we can go to the next slide, Jeff.
Yeah.
Again, here's our contact information if you have additional questions. Also, oh, I do have one more question right on the
Hillary asked to follow up.
let's see, I don't want the record anymore in the system, and currently you can delete records in RE and FE, but you cannot delete constituent records in GE. Is that something we could cover, Jeff, or would you like to reach out separately?
You bet. No, it's definitely a good answer for the whole group here. So thanks for following up, Hillary. When we look at a constituent record here in FCG, these are probably all in use, but I'm going to go ahead and pull up a constituent record. The buttons here that let you work with this constituent record. There is a delete constituent button available here when it's relevant. So on your user security, you've got to have permission to delete a constituent. So that's one of the permissions down here. These are alphabetized. Delete constituent is an option. So your user has to have a role which has this delete constituent function enabled. But then the constituent record has to meet criteria for deletion. So if it's a brand new constituent record that was created through the portal, for example, then if that constituent record doesn't have any applications yet or any grant recommendations yet, if you haven't given a grant to them yet, etc., haven't added any characteristics. There are a bunch of data conditions that have to be met. But if it's a constituent that's essentially not in use, then you can remove it from FCG. If there's any data associated with it, then that's not going to be available for deletion. But if you create a brand new one accidentally, then a lot of times folks will say, now what do I do? I've created this brand new constituent. I can't get rid of it. So we did implement that delete constituent function. If you don't see it, then it's either because you don't have permission with your role, or it's going to be because that's not a brand new record. There's some data there that we have associated with that record. So if you need it deleted and it's empty, but for some reason FCG doesn't think it's empty, go ahead and open a support ticket, and they'll be able to help you identify that and get it deleted.
Great, thank you.
Great question. You bet.
All right. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. That did go fast. Thanks so much to Jeff Armstrong, our Chief Innovation Officer, and we'll see you all on Wednesday, October 18th for our next Let's Talk Solutions. Thanks, everyone.